Okay, so this is my first Kegger that I'm modifying. I'd like to talk about airflow for a minute. I've done a decent amount of research. I'm well aware of the two leading people on YouTube that have modified these. Done several videos and dyno videos. So I've done my research and I like some of what they did, and then I don't agree with some of what they're doing, as well as several of the other videos I see. It's kind of a monkey see monkey do. Everybody's copying each other, and what I see to me is that they're all making similar mistakes because they're copying each other. So let's just touch on the ports real quick. So there's a hump in here past the injector. I think that can be taken out, and that's something that I did take out here. There's a sharper angle right here that can be flattened out pretty big. Doesn't need to have that type of an angle there. And then, as I do on everything, you always get a gain by raising the roof. So there's my gasket window. And these ones I left just a little, I don't know, we'll call it a 32nd of an inch. And the reason for that is I'm going to open my head up to the gasket window, fully to the gasket window. And that way, if there's any core shift or anything in there, I'm not going to run into any problems. And the small little bit there will help fight reversion. So let's talk about that for a second. So when your intake closes, there's several pulses back and forth. Could be like 25, 28 pulses back and forth between the butterflies on your carburetor or on your throttle body and the valve. It's not just one linear motion of the airflow from the throttle body into the valve, but there's pulses back and forth as the valve train goes through its motion and your intake valve is opening and closing. So that's why I talk about reversion here and those pulses going back up the intake. The other thing, when you're porting and when you're doing oddball stuff or whatever, a general rule is if it looks like it's going to flow, it's going to flow. It's going to help flow. And it's not an excuse for a flow bench or research or any of that, but if you look like you're making a straighter path, a better path, chances are you're going to see the results of that on a flow bench and in terms of power. And what I'm talking about there is I see a lot of the guys, they come in and they knife edge these runners, but they tend to come right down the middle and knife edge the center divider here. To me, when your air is coming in from your throttle body, it's going to favor your inside cylinders. You're going to get better flow to these cylinders than you are going by the cylinder to your outer cylinders. And the reason for that, I talked about the pulses. So you're going to have, I don't want to say turbulence, but you're going to have either pulses of air, or you're going to be drawing in air on this cylinder, and that's going to pull in more air to these cylinders than it is to go by it to the outside cylinder, because those pulses on this cylinder are going to disrupt some of the airflow to this cylinder, to the outside cylinder. So for that reason, instead of knife edging straight down the center, what I did was I took the outer cylinder and I tapered it all the way to the inner cylinder. I favored the outer cylinder in terms of airflow because that is going to get less airflow than you're going to get on your inner cylinder here. So I tapered this edge all the way to the inside edge here, and then I bullnosed this edge. I rounded that over here. So I favored this cylinder, knowing that that's going to be the weaker cylinder or the leaner cylinder. I favored that cylinder in terms of airflow to help get as much as possible to that cylinder, and not favor this one. So that's something that I think is a worthwhile improvement, is don't knife edge this divider right down the center line, but bring it all the way over to your inside cylinder first. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to mirror that result on your inside cylinders. You're going to bullnose this wall here. See if I can show you one. You're going to bullnose this wall here towards your throttle body. So I'm really trying to favor those cylinders. Another thing that I see, so this is an early EGR manifold. You can see I cut out the EGR. This is your center divider I cut down. I left a decent amount of center divider, and the reason is I'm pretty sure I'm going to epoxy in this area, and when I epoxy that in, that's going to give the epoxy more material to grab onto to stay in this area. Now I've seen the filler plates and the silicone jobs and all that stuff. I've also seen one where a guy, you know, built a wall here, a dam, and he filled the thing up with 2-component epoxy. I actually kind of like that. I think that's not a bad way to go. What I think I'm going to do is on the back cylinders, I think I'm going to bring it level to this point. But then instead of bringing it square, I don't like the plates that they put in here, or even the guy that did it with epoxy. I don't like it being square here, because again, you want to work in terms of airflow. So I think from this point over, I'll make it level. And then from this point, I'm going to sort of taper in here and help that transition of that airflow to start to come around the bend here, to start to come around that curve. Remember, air likes to go around a corner. You know, it likes to pick up speed in a curve. So I'm going to take this part of the epoxy and I'm going to curve it down to this part of the manifold here. And I'm going to help airflow from my throttle body there start to make that transition both directions. That's something that I haven't seen yet, and I think that's a better design than just coming up here with a straight 90-degree plate there and trying to get your air to turn 90 degrees and make it back to this back cylinder from your throttle body. Remember, air only likes to turn 15 degrees at a time, so when you put a 90-degree plate in there, you're not promoting airflow to the back parts of this manifold here, and you're going to favor these cylinders and not this cylinder back here. You're going to end up with a cylinder that doesn't get nearly the same airflow. Anyhow, that's my take on a Kegger. I'm still doing it. I'm not done with it, but through the research I've seen, there's some things that I like and just some things that I just don't agree with in terms of airflow.